got it. This is the first EE Talk that we're having. The EE Talks is an event where all the senior candidates are going to present the experience of their extended essay process. So let me tell you a story. When I was in high school and right before starting my IB diploma program, a teacher came to us and asked, if you can learn about anything you want, what would that be? After that minute, everyone was thinking, and after 1 minute, this teacher said, keep that topic in mind because you'll be writing 4,000 words about it. And that's how I found out what the extended essay was. Monografía. I did it in Spanish. So then, back in the days, I was leading a couple of after-school clubs, and I was really into leadership. I was passionate about the topic. So my research question ended up being, and I'm going to read it because I don't even remember it that well, was to what extent the skill set of top management has an impact over business profit and success. That was my extended essay. I graduated from high school, I went to business school, I took a couple of majors in communications and marketing, then I worked in corporate world in different areas. I worked in marketing, I worked in purchases, I worked in communications. But then lately, just 4 years ago, I realized that I wanted to do a career change. And I became a published author, as well as a library media specialist, and I'm here at ISP working as a librarian and an extended essay coordinator. So it was until then, when I was working as an extended essay coordinator, when I reflected back on my experience, and I thought, oh my God, my research topic, my research question, chased me all my professional and my personal life. Because I was a living proof, I was embodying what transfer skills concept mean. And that was a concept that I researched a lot during my extended essay. So at that point, I went back to the question that a teacher said, if I could do research, if I could learn about anything in the world, what would it be? So that's the importance that I think that the extended essay has. And some seniors here, they recently picked their topics, their extended essay topics, and developed them. And some of them picked something that they were really interested about, right? And I really hope in a positive way that it follows them, it chases them for the rest of their lives. And that some of you, when you look back, you said whoa, that was what made me happy, that was what I had passion about when you're my age, right? So there are some juniors here that in 4 days you have to pick your topics. And the question that I want to make for you guys is, in 4 days, by the way, April 5th. And the question that I want to make is if you can learn about anything you want, what would that be? Hopefully these EE Talks will inspire you to pick a topic that you're really passionate about and something that you really believe at, something that you can have to think hard and that makes you feel alive, right? Pick a topic that you can. The IB extended essay is mandatory to do it, but the topic is not imposed. So choose wisely. Choose something that you have a personal interest about, and it will make the whole difference. That's why students like Nico and Diego, which are going to be presenting today, Nico is going to be presenting, they are just like other candidates, they produce great extended essays. In their case, there were cases that they were really passionate about their topics. And that's what I want to show you. That's what Nico is going to be sharing today. So let's hear from Ms. Bajak why Nico's extended essay was so great and successful.
So this is meant to be encouraging and inspirational for all of you. But for me, I am an examiner for the extended essay for the IB, so I have read and assessed probably closing in on 300 of them at this point, all in business. But Nico's really stood out, and actually in my commentary, because teachers have to give commentary as well, that has to validate that we believe the students' work is their own. And in my commentary I wrote, if I didn't know this student, I would not believe that it was student-built, because the level of academic accomplishment that he achieved was at university level. In fact, I had to go back, as a business expert who was in business and who teaches business, I had to go back and refresh my own memory on how to do certain of the things that he was doing, like cash flow analysis, discounted cash flow analysis, in order to be able to help him. And that's the sign of an A-level extended essay. If you can get to the point of sophistication that your work is deemed to be university level, then you've done an excellent job. And this can be in anything you choose. It has to be something that you're passionate about, but it also has to be within the subject matter. So that's why I thought Nico did a particularly good job, because he was very interested in his topic and he drove beyond just the requirements of the class to almost strain his teacher in helping him. So that should be your goal, is to stump your teacher and make them go back and better themselves in order to be able to help you.
Thank you, Ms. Bella. So a little bit about Nico. Nicolas Soto, or Nico, was born in Venezuela but has lived here in Panama for more than 10 years. At ISP, he was developed an interest for business and finance, one that he has explored on his own and through the IB curriculum, taking classes such as IB Economics and Business Management. He's also a fan of debating and has been involved in that extracurricular activity through different positions in the Panamun program. Along with one of his peers, he recently began the investment club and continues to work towards establishing a sustainable and entertaining club to learn about finance. Please help me welcome Nico Soto to the stage.
Good afternoon, high school. My name is Nicolas Soto, and I'm here today to talk about my extended essay. Now, I know that some seniors might want to kill me for bringing up this topic again, but that's exactly the reason why I'm here. Ms. Jamal, Diego, and I all want to change the culture that surrounds the extended essay, hopefully giving future IB candidates an opportunity to find something that they're interested in and to help them engage a little bit more with the process of writing a 4,000-word essay. The way Diego and I are helping with this to achieve this goal is by sharing a little bit about our own experience writing the extended essay as an example of two candidates who were passionate and engaged throughout the whole process. So my topic for the extended essay, well, it was focused on business management, and the topic I chose was that of Amazon's acquisition of Whole Foods Market and the impact that that event had on Amazon's stock value. And I know this might seem a little bit complicated for some people, so let me just explain a little bit further what this means. To start off, it's a term acquisition. An acquisition, so let's consider company A and company B. An acquisition takes place when company A buys company B, and this smaller company B now operates under company A. And so company A, being the acquiring company, and obviously the larger one, remains with a larger extent of decision-making power. And an acquisition is known as an external growth strategy. And large companies like Amazon use it to increase their sales by using other corporate entities, increase their sales for profit. But the point is that they don't use internal methods to do so. They use other corporate entities to do so. Now, the next part of my research question is that of the stock value. And I think for this, it might be better for me to explain the whole context of what stock value is about. So most of you have probably done something like a lemonade stand at some point in your childhood. So let's consider the business of a lemonade stand. Let's say that you've been operating a lemonade stand here in Panama for about a year now, and you have decent sales and profits. And now you've realized that there's an opportunity to expand your business, to increase your sales and your profits by establishing a new location. But the problem is that you don't have the funds to do so. And so you go to the bank and you ask for a loan, but they won't give you a loan because they think that your business is not sustainable enough. And on top of that, you don't have a credit score that the bank can use to evaluate the risk of giving you a loan. And so then you have no other option left but to use what is known as obtaining share capital. And that basically takes place when you split up your business into shares and you sell parts of your business to the public. So let's say that you value your lemonade stand at $1,000 and you want to divide that value into 100 different shares. You will now have 100 shares valued each at $10, and you would go to an investment bank. The investment bank would help you list your company, the lemonade stand, on the National Stock Exchange, and then you would be able to sell shares of your company to the public or to investors. And so you want to keep 60% ownership of your company because you want to retain the majority of the decision-making power. So then you sell 40 shares, and for $10 each, that gives you $400. This is money, cash that you receive immediately, and that you can now use to fund the establishment of your new location. And so hopefully now you will establish this new location, you will increase your sales, increase your profits, and drive more and more interest from investors. Now, the implication of this is that now you're considered a publicly traded company. And what this means is that you're a company that's listed on the stock market, and now you have to share your profits with those other investors who are owners of your company. So when you receive profits, assuming that you don't reinvest these profits into the business, you're going to have 60% of them, and 40% of those profits will go to all the other shareholders of your company. Now, connecting this back to Amazon, which is the company I'm using for my topic, just like Lemonade Stand, Amazon is a publicly traded company. And it's one that is listed on a national stock exchange, and where investors can buy and or sell shares of the company. But the main difference, apart from the fact that obviously Amazon is very different to Lemonade Stand, the main difference is their size. And that's something that's very important when it comes to considering the stock value of a company. Just as a fact, the larger a company gets, the more factors there are for investors to judge it by. So a company like Amazon has several different branches. They've acquired several different companies in the past. So it's a company that is very difficult to judge because there's several different things that you can look at to determine where the stock value of that company is going to go in the future. So, and the way stock value works is that investors have thoughts about a company. So if they think that, for example, Amazon's acquisition of Whole Foods will generate a positive value in the future, then there will be more demand for that limited number of shares in the market. And this will obviously start increasing the value of those shares, which is what investors want. So basically, my research question makes sense, and I think it's one that provides for a valuable discussion because it's an important event. In particular, this has been Amazon's largest acquisition in history, so it's one that has driven lots of attention from investors and that has caused Amazon to move very drastically in their stock value. So now you guys know a little bit more about my research question. Let me explain why I chose this topic. I believe that choosing a topic is one of the most important parts of the extended essay because it's part of what will determine your success or the degree of success that you can achieve with your extended essay, or at least that was my case. So first off, just by show of hands, who here is familiar or at least has used Amazon in the past? Exactly, so that's most of you, right? I've used Amazon several times in the past, and that's one of the reasons why I chose it. It's a company to which I've been exposed to their services and some of their products, and so I know how their business model works. And so this made my life a little bit easier when I was writing the extended essay, because there was a lot of information to digest, and having awareness of their business model simply made the process a little bit easier. Another reason why I chose it is because I've been tracking Amazon for 2 years now, and it's a company that really intrigues me. I'm really interested on the way they're achieving growth at the cost of extraordinary profits. They're keeping profits moderately low that allow them to be sustainable, but they're reinvesting a lot of those profits in research and development and in acquisitions, because they're simply a very technological company who want to make change in the future, and they know that acquisitions will help them do that. And despite the fact that these profits aren't exaggeratingly high, a lot of investors are interested in this company. And as you guys know, if there's a lot of interest from investors, stock value will rise, and the value of the company in general will be higher. And that's why Amazon has been very close to reaching a $1 trillion valuation. Right now it's currently at about $850 billion. I also chose the topic of an acquisition because I thought it's a very important corporate event that can have certain implications for Amazon in the future, and it's one that allows for lots of discussion. So for the extended essay, there's a lot of things that one can talk about in terms of an acquisition. And then I decided to relate it to the topic of the stock value because it's something that I'm interested in. And I know that it's something I can handle. And despite the fact that it's not in the IB curriculum, I know I would be engaged as I read about that topic. So despite the fact that choosing the topic is one of the more important parts, the most difficult part for me of the extended essay was planning and decision making before actually writing the essay. And what happened in my case was that I wasn't really sure of how I was going to respond to the question. Because when it comes to very large companies like Amazon and the concept of the stock value, it's very difficult to relate one specific event to a particular change in the value of a company, because there's so many different factors that could change that value. So one of the issues I faced was that the applicability of my arguments. I wasn't sure if I was accurately arguing the extent to which this acquisition would have a significant change on Amazon's stock value. And the way I solved this was by focusing on creating subsections in my essay that would emphasize the extent to which this would be the case, or to which the acquisition would have an impact. Another part I had trouble with was the investor perspective. So my topic question in nature is externally oriented. But when I began writing my essay, what happened was that I was researching a lot of internal factors, because that's what the IB business management curriculum is focused on. So I started researching all this information, and I went to my first meeting with Ms. Bejak, and I realized that I wasn't really answering my question. I had to redirect the way I was thinking about my question so that it's more focused on the investor perspective. So I went out, I reconsidered the way I was going to answer it, and I started researching more about what investors do to evaluate the value of a stock. And then from that, I chose the tools that would be most beneficial to evaluating it in the context of an acquisition. Then finally, a quantitative perspective, integrating that into my essay was one of the toughest challenges as well, because that's something that is highly recommended for IB Business Management extended essays if you want to get to the A level. And I had the problem that I was dealing with the concept of stock value and with two very large companies. And so I had a lot of information, officially published information with numbers, but I wasn't sure what to do with it. And what I did is that I contacted someone. I contacted someone who was experienced in the area of finance, and they helped me learn a little bit about discounted cash flow analysis. And that's something I was a little bit familiar with from experience I obtained when I did an internship last summer, but I wasn't sure how to apply it in this context. So they helped me out in that sense. And in the end, because of the interest I had, I was able to learn how to do this and integrate it into my essay, which turned out very successfully. Now, these problems I all solved during the research and writing process. It was all a very progressive, it all turned out very progressively. It was slow and it was difficult, but in the end, I managed to do it. And the way I began doing this was just by reading lots of business articles and academic journals from sources such as the Harvard Business Review. I just tried to gain an idea of the general investor sentiment that there was for Amazon at the time, just because this would allow me to have an idea of what other people think the acquisition might do in the future. And after that, I went into Amazon's and Whole Foods 10K documents, which basically refer to the annual financial statements that they provide to the public as publicly traded companies. And I started reading about the risks, I started looking at their numbers, and I started making my own conclusions with support of those other opinions that I looked at in those business articles. After that, I was able to come up with four specific tools through which I wanted to answer my question. And I chose the ones of sources of finance, which is basically how Amazon funded this $13.7 billion acquisition. Then the percentage of goodwill that this acquisition consisted of, which has a lot of, which involves risks in certain ways. Then the synergies that are involved in the acquisition, which are one of the most important aspects of an acquisition, and in fact, is one of the things that companies consider the most when considering the possibility of acquiring another company or merging with another company. And finally, I decided to do the discounted cash flow analysis with the help of a finance professional whom I interviewed. And the reason I did this was to get all the potential synergies from the acquisition and put them in a numerical perspective, meaning if there's a benefit in profit, what does that percentage look like? And what is the value that Amazon will gain 10 years from now? So in general, what I found, after looking at all these different perspectives to answer my question, I found that this acquisition is indeed positive for Amazon's stock value. And I mean, it should be if all executives are betting so much on this. Take note that this has been Amazon's most expensive acquisition in history. It's been a $13.7 billion acquisition. And what's particularly interesting about this situation is that the acquisition value, 70% of it was accounted for by goodwill. And goodwill is basically an intangible asset. It's something that doesn't exist. It's just the idea that a company has a reputation, a customer base, a brand identity. And these are things that would help a company generate surplus value in the future. And so I went in and I discussed the implications of this high percentage of goodwill, and I found out that even though it is high risk and it is above the industry average, it just shows us that Amazon's executives are very confident about the synergies that can be created from this acquisition. And so that's something that investors like, because if they know that the company executives are confident with what they're doing, it is very likely that the decision will turn out very profitably. I also looked into sources of finance, and Amazon decided to carry out this acquisition as an all-cash expenditure, but they did have debt as well. And the total cost of the interest they're paying from now up to 30 years is about $550 million, which is somewhat expensive. So this basically shows us that if it's expensive, they're confident that this acquisition will generate surplus value and they will be able to cover those $550 million. I also looked at the synergies, and some examples of these synergies are increased Amazon Prime sales from the Whole Foods Market customer base. Amazon is giving Prime deals to Whole Foods customers, and this, as a consequence, is increasing sales for Amazon. And through the discounted cash flow analysis, I basically took all these sources of synergies and I did some estimates, such as, for example, a 10% increase in the sales for Amazon Prime. And I turned this into a final $4.8 billion net present value that would be added to Amazon from now on to 10 years. So, after this whole experience, there are 5 key takeaways that I learned. There are 5 key takeaways that I learned about, and these are things that everyone else who's going to the extended essay could apply in their experience. For those doing an extended essay in business management, it is very important to know that analyzing publicly traded companies is very difficult. There's lots of information on the internet, there's lots of biased information on the internet, and these companies are very dynamic. They have several different branches, and it's difficult to consider so many things at once. But with a little bit of focus and narrowing down of events, you can get to the conclusion that you want to achieve. Then the other part is to not panic, because I panicked a little bit in my extended essay when I thought that I would have to change my research question completely. As I said, I got to a point where I wasn't even sure if my research question was viable enough. I didn't know if I was going to be able to explain it accurately, and I thought that the analysis would be a little bit too fake, it would be all internet-based, but turns out it wasn't. There's always, as long as you choose a topic for which you have an interest, there's always an opportunity to take a deep breath, talk to your supervisor, and try to figure things out. It's also important to always be open-minded about the solutions you are going to use to tackle these issues that arise throughout your extended essay. In my personal case, I decided to do an interview, and this was definitely very helpful because, the other option I could have done is simply avoided the idea of doing a discounted cash flow analysis. But just because I was inspired and interested in the topic, I decided to go ahead and do an interview and learn how to do it, because it's something that I know I will pursue when I go to college and continue my studies in the area of finance. Then, something that I think people underestimate is the way the extended essay can help you with your college applications. In my case, with the extended essay, I learned how to write about technical financial concepts, and there are some college applications or business school and college essays that require you to explain concepts like these or just mention them and to basically demonstrate your interest in the topic. And so I basically took advantage of the extended essay to articulate these topics in my essays. And I also highlighted certain things I was doing with my essay to show that I was interested in finance, interested in business, and simply ready to take on a challenge in college, right? And finally, if there's one final tip I would give anyone, is to choose a topic you're interested in, because there's nothing worse than doing a 4,000-word essay about something you don't like. Sometimes it might be easier, but you will make it a significantly less burdensome process if you choose a topic that you like and it will make it be a much more valuable experience. Like, it's better if you choose to do something where you will learn something that you could actually use in college. If you do it in business and you want to study business, it's definitely going to be connected to what you do in the future. So we don't have time for questions, but if any one of you have any questions after this, please don't be afraid to approach me. I'll be happy to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. That was fantastic. I have been wanting this to happen for a long time, and I want to thank Ms. Jamal for making it happen. I also, last year, Diego Estevez came to me at the beginning of the year and said, can we start doing this? Can we start doing a speaker series? And I said, absolutely, that would be fantastic. Let's get it going. And we finally did. So, and any of you could do this. It's not just Nico. Nico is particularly talented in this area, but my own advisees, we could have heard about the rise of the Polish Right Party. We could have talked about the impact of the LA riots on the Korean community. We could have talked about a responsibility to protect in the UN. I mean, there's lots of topics out there. So think about what you might want to present. Next week, we're going to do Diego Estevez. We'll be up here doing his TED Talk, or his EE Talk, sorry.